Hello and welcome to the African Tech Roundup episode 104. Now this is where we round up the week's most important tech, digital and innovation news from across the African continent. My name is Andile Masugu and I'm so glad you could join us. And boy, do we have a jam-packed show for you. Again, as promised, it's a fortnight from the last time I said he'd be back, and he is. Musa Kalenga, what's up, bruh?
What's up, Andile? Mama, I made it to the second show.
Yeah, dog. Get used to it, folks.
Yeah, I'm glad to be back. Thank you for having me. And looking forward to a really great show. Lots of stuff to discuss. But as usual, I'm hoping it's going to be fantastic.
That's true. Not only do we have you here on the mic, but we have a special guest who may be dropping in. We're crossing our fingers because he's weaving his way towards us. He's easily one of East Africa's finest digital heads and arguably one of the most connected individuals in Kenya. We won't say who he is, just in case he doesn't rock up, and then we're just...
then we left here with an empty segment. But maybe we can play a game. Maybe you can guess who it is.
In the meantime, guess who it is. And here's to hoping he makes it in time. So that's going to be an extra special show. But also extra special because last week we didn't get a chance to... cover that week's news because I was away in London, and instead of covering the week's news, of course, we put out content that kept you guys, held you guys down until this week. And so we've got tons of stuff to talk about. But before we get to all of that, this episode of the African Tech Roundup is brought to you by Europe's preeminent African tech event, the Afrobytes Tech Conference. And it's going down in Paris between June 8th and 9th, 2017. Now, we're honored to be one of their partners this year. Really stoked to be a part of the program, facilitating a panel. Looking forward to that. I'll be speaking alongside a killer list of individuals. I rattled off a ton of them 2 weeks ago, and what you need to do is basically go check out how well curated this event has become. You can find all the information you need at afrobytes.com. It will be hosted at MEDEF, which is of course the largest entrepreneur network in France. Lots of really important people starting to buy into the notion of Africa being not a flash in the pan, but a serious player in terms of the global tech community. And we're really glad to be part of what Afrobytes is doing in France come the 8th and the 9th of June. Can't wait to see you there. And so before we get into the week's news, Musa, what you've been up to, man? You're a busy man.
Apparently I'm a busy man. No, there's been a lot happening. We're cooking up something in the kitchen around my new business, which is an advertising startup. So I'm going to be sharing some of that in the next coming weeks. So that's been keeping me quite busy. But I'm also working towards a masterclass. So as part of what I do, I try and help people understand kind of the context of digital marketing, not necessarily being the thing anymore, but around marketing in a digital context. So next week, 3rd of June, we're running a masterclass in Johannesburg at the Standard Bank Incubator, and hopefully, whoever can rock up will get a little bit of insight. It's a 3-hour jam-packed kind of immersion, and we're trying to design it so that people can leave there with something, something tangible. So that's what I've been working towards, and so far so good.
You're becoming like an educator. Is this going to be available online eventually? Is it going to be like a little course available on something like Skillshare or Udemy or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are converting the content to be on a learning management system called Clock Education. So it will be freely available, and we'll be updating that and making sure that we've got fresh case studies and the rest of it. So for the moment, we're starting out with a one-on-one interaction, but definitely part of our next kind of iteration around the content is going to be how we make it available online. So you will be able to get that online.
Pretty good. And the reason I know you've been busy, even though I've been away, is because I've been getting these emails from your team inviting me to basically beta test some of the interesting things that you guys have baking. I know I can't say much about it, but yeah, I'm on it that I'm on the list.
Of course you're on the list, and hopefully we can get some feedback from you. But as you said, we're going to come and tell the listeners all about it. I'm quite excited. I think we're doing some interesting things without blowing too much steam up our own proverbials. But we're going to be telling you all about that. But we're solving big problems for SMEs. I think when I say we, my team and I really believe in unlocking opportunities for African startups, African small businesses, and therefore hopefully we have one of the solutions. So yeah, excited.
And I, of course, have been in London for the Internet of Things World Forum. It was actually quite an eye-opener. All the biggies you might expect to be at the event were at the event, the likes of Cisco, Rockwell Automation, Intel, who else? They'll feel bad for me leaving them out. Of course, Dimension Data flying the flag for Africa, indeed South Africa out there, and it was really interesting to listen to all the incredible use cases for IoT coming out from the rest of the world, case studies for amazing work being done, but also in my interest there was really to figure out what's applicable to our developing world context, and also interrogate some of these big companies around, the sort of digital ethics that are coming up because of the proliferation of big data and how it's used as a result of the Internet of Things. Of course, security issues as well. So it was quite an eye-opening week. Again, I was told it was my first time in London, by the way, and I was told that it was for a first-time visit, the weather I enjoyed while I was there is unprecedented. It was incredible. Like averaged 23 to 27 degrees the whole time. It was awesome.
Are you serious? Yeah, that is unprecedented.
No rain. It was incredible, except for the sad bombings in Manchester, which sort of marred things slightly. But the Brits certainly do just get on with it, though.
Yeah. No, that's very sad. But I'm glad you had great weather. I'm also interested in, key themes, like what was coming out. I think Internet of Things, as you said, in our context, are we there? Are we behind the curve? What are the things that people should be thinking about? I'm quite interested to know.
So we will definitely be. I'm glad you're interested, and if you're curious, it means our listeners may just be. And the good news is, I got a ton of interesting content, amazing conversations. I was asking questions, and just to give you a taster. So the big corporates are looking at things from the standpoint of how do we improve the rate of success in terms of companies who are adopting the Internet of Things as part of their digital transformations, because apparently, according to research that Cisco's done, only 26% of IoT related projects are actually successful in the corporate and organizational landscape. And that's a really, really a bad thing. It doesn't bode well for companies like Rockwell and, the likes of Intel and, of course, Cisco in terms of like enthusing other clientele if other people aren't getting it done so well. And then they've also identified some pain points around why it doesn't work out. Best practice approaches to rolling out solutions gradually or adopting lean startup methodology. All sorts of things are being discussed in terms of how corporates can best leverage this trend and maximize it. So that's from a corporate standpoint. And then there's all these interesting things around public use cases in terms of how, IoT has the potential to improve the lives of public citizens, So there's a ton of stuff, and I'm not even doing it justice because I spoke to people way smarter than me, and I can't wait to share it with all of you in due course. That will happen.
If you don't mind me giving my 2 cents, because I think the low success rate is quite interesting. I was having discussions with the guys from PwC around the research they did for the Digital IQ, and I think I mentioned it last show, that a lot of CEOs seem to be struggling with like basic understanding of digitizing their enterprises, yet they're still investing up to 74% of their resources on things like artificial intelligence, right? So my question is, if you are still struggling to digitize your enterprise, how is it that you're investing in artificial intelligence? Because clearly those things are like, the incremental learning. If you understand how data works, you understand social media, then maybe you can, iterate around that and understand how to get central view of customer. Then you can iterate around that. And, you have to build your knowledge base and understanding how they work. So the low success rate, I think, probably is due to the fact that these guys are probably under pressure to do stuff, and they don't know what they're actually doing. So they invest in things and they just don't get value.
And certainly the promise is real. Yeah. It's just the challenges are often underestimated or misunderstood altogether. A key thing to come out of the conference again is talent or the lack thereof in terms of executing. Also, it's not just about trying to look at your business and thinking, hey, where can we get more data by sprinkling sensors all over the place? It's about approaching it with a holistic mindset, also understanding that a staggered approach, as opposed to approaching it as like one massive project, also admitting the gaps in knowledge or competencies within your own team. So there's a lot of things that came out of that conference. And you have to take all of it with a pinch of salt, because it's the likes of Cisco, right? Saying, teams need help and of course, come to us.
Yeah, come to me.
Take that with a pinch of salt. But again, like you say, you do have digital officers, chief information officers, certainly MDs, CMOs even, who are latching onto this trend, throwing a ton of budget at it without adequate thinking or adequate understanding or appreciation for what it takes to actually milk this trend.
Yeah, well, I think, as you said, it's a trend, and hopefully the understanding starts to increase so they can see better returns than 26%. I mean, that's not encouraging. But as you said, I think it's going to be one of those things that they have to get right. So, yeah, looking forward to more snippets from your trip. So.
And they will definitely be coming. It might be in the coming week. I was thinking of doing like a whole IoT themed episode. We'll see how it goes. No promises, but the insights you will definitely get in due course.
Cool. We like promises. So can you make
Yeah, I don't do promises on this show.
Okay, fine. We'll just hold you to it. Thank you.
What is this, radio? No.
What is this?
This is the internet, bruh.
I like that. Fake news. Fake promises.
No, we do what we like, but we keep it real.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, then. So on to the news we go. Let's start with MTN now. Now, if you're listening to the show, last year MTN dominated the headlines on this show because mostly because of their troubles in Nigeria, the Nigerian Communications Commission, of course, fining them around flouting regulations around SIM card registration. It was this massive multi-billion-dollar fine that eventually came down to $1 billion that they've since started to pay off, and of course leading to MTN's very first year ever of a reported loss. It was just a nasty year for them. And now it doesn't seem, the pressure's letting up. The Rwandese government is fining MTN for flouting regulations in that country. Whoa.
Yeah, that's huge, and I think the fine itself is not anything to be smirked at. It's 8.5 million francs, so it's going to be, $1 million, sorry. And I think the challenge with that is MTN against a huge backdrop of nothing more than 4 paws when it comes to regulatory perspective, doesn't seem to be getting this right. And I think when it comes down to core business around things like being able to ensure that your SIM cards are regulated, to this, which is essentially them deliberately going outside of their service mandate outside of Rwanda, I think it's a challenge. I think from an MTN perspective, I don't know whether there's an internal problem or I don't know whether there's a failure to understand the operating context. But last year, they set aside a lot of fines that were imposed on them. I think $600 million at that time by the Nigerian government, and now it doesn't seem to be getting any better. So it's worrying. It's really concerning.
Yeah, it turns out MTN hosted, customer data in Uganda and not in Rwanda, and Rwanda is really strict about the need for them to host that data in that country. It's interesting to see data sovereignty becoming an issue. I remember it was a huge deal last year. I mean, there've been a number of cases, but one of the ones that comes to mind immediately is that case where the Russian government basically just switched LinkedIn off because they're like, homies, you guys have Russian citizen data sitting in servers in the US. Our rules have since stated that if you're going to have Russian citizen data sitting in any shape or form, it's going to need to be on servers in our country. And it's interesting to see a country like Rwanda flexing its muscles around a similar issue.
I think it's encouraging because Rwanda obviously it's like the shining star of Africa right now when it comes to innovation, when it comes to enabling small businesses. But more importantly, as you're saying, I think this concept of data sovereignty for a country like Rwanda to be able to enforce something like this is really a great signal for them as a country. It means that they're worried and concerned about the correct things, and it means that they're thinking about the preservation of consumer data, which I think is an extremely good signal for anybody investing in that sector in Rwanda. So from that perspective, I say big up to the Rwandan government. Slap on the wrist definitely for MTN, but I think it's a good signal for a country like Rwanda on a growth trajectory.
I think this speaks to the notion that data is the new oil, the new gold. I think this is a government that understands the power of ensuring that what's essentially an IT business like MTN doesn't willy-nilly decide to host its services elsewhere. It must do it in the country. I know there'll be a lot of pure hardline capitalists that'll look at this and think, hey, this is protectionism, or on some level even populism that might be problematic. But in the context of what's happening worldwide and how we see even Western nations flex their muscles in this regard, China been doing it. Rwanda is clearly well within their right to do this, and MTN was well aware of those rules when they decided to flout them. So,
which I think is important, right? So you sign up to operate in a particular context, and you have to toe the line. So yeah, I agree with you completely.
So there you go. Moving on now to some interesting acquisition news right here in South Africa, where we're based. Capital Appreciation has acquired a business called Synthesis. Now, Capital Appreciation is a GSC listed group, IT group, and they've acquired 100% of Synthesis Software Technologies for what is 132.1 million rand, or roughly $10 million. Now, Synthesis is a cloud-based software development, consulting, and integration services firm that specializes in servicing financial institutions. This is a pretty big deal.
Yep. And they work across all the blue chip financial organizations in South Africa, which I think is important to note, because my personal opinion is that I think the big five institutions when it comes to financial services are really in trouble because their core systems aren't really set up to innovate around the consumer and the changing world that we're going into. So I think this is typically a signal to market that the software that's being developed using software as a service, and essentially enabling the value chains for these businesses is going to be something that's going to be important for them to survive in this kind of post-consumer phase of the market. But at the same time, I think Synthesis continues to be an independent operating business, which is also a good thing. So once you've developed IP and skills and services around something, it's often a bad signal when you get ingested and your identity is taken away. So I think that for them is great. So as they grow in a specialized role in financial tech, I'm pretty sure they're going to be doing extremely well.
Financial institutions are typically criticized for not integrating well. Even when they do have digital platforms, typically their APIs are either closed or ridiculously difficult to integrate with. And it certainly does seem that there's a trend towards partnering or bringing on board partners such as these who sort of skirt the fintech / regulation tech landscape. Interestingly, I happened to write about that in I think 2 weeks ago in my column for African Independent, and it's interesting to see how important it's becoming to have a partner in that space for financial incumbents.
Yeah. What's also interesting to note is Synthesis was founded in 1997, right? So it's not a Johnny-come-lately business, but there are areas of focus which I think are key for anybody that's starting a business in fintech to understand, is that they're looking at cloud computing, digital channels, blockchain, and big data. Those are kind of the four horsemen at the moment in the financial technology space. And I think they're trying to understand artificial intelligence. There's some machine learning that they've got in there, but typically those are very specialized areas in the technology space that most, if not all, banks and financial institutions agree are going to be the future of unlocking consumer opportunities. So I really think that's a positive signal. And 1997, that they've paid their dues. That's a long time.
They've been around.
Exactly, they've been at it. And I think once again, I think it's also a signal to startups to look at that as inspiration, but also you got to put in the time, you got to put in the work. There's this flash in the pan mentality that you create something amazing and then all of a sudden you're a superstar. So well done, Synthesis. Hats off and congratulations and good luck, I think.
Indeed, do. Yeah. So some more acquisition news. Again, South Africa-based ICT firm Adapt IT Holdings have acquired a hospitality and retail IT company called Micro for $4.2 million. Apparently, the deal was reached on the 10th of May. Now, Micro, as it turns out, specializes in selling software, hardware, and enterprise systems. They also provide integration and consulting as well as support for various clients within the hospitality industry. Quite a niche. I'm fascinated by this concept of building solidly around niche. Do you think that's key to perhaps startup founders who are thinking about how to approach launching into the big bad world?
Yeah, I think the more sophisticated a market gets, the more you're going to require to be developing around a niche, right? So in the beginning, I think it's fair to kind of have a broader approach around what you bring in as solutions. But I think the more sophisticated and the more progressive industry or markets are, they require slightly more turnkey and niche solutions in specific spaces. I was actually, funny enough, at the University of Johannesburg, their awards evening for the hospitality graduates, and I was speaking to them about very much exactly this: is that for young people coming into hospitality, their viewpoint needs to be understanding the value chain, right? If they're going to be able to add value and try and disrupt and do all that kind of stuff, if you've got a full view of what it takes to be able to run, call it a hotel or whatever it may be from end to end, you've got a better understanding of what businesses you need to build into the future. And this play, which seems to be around software, hardware, and enterprise systems, for me is a very clever thing to do, because I think a lot of people are going to be trying to define the consumer trend of the future around hospitality. What are people going to be consuming? Already it's being disrupted by things like food trucks, by what are these markets on the weekend. So it's shifting. It's becoming a little bit more nuanced. And big businesses that are in hospitality are probably trying to figure out what that means for their business. So integrating a business like this that is essentially building that knowledge base, I think is a clever strategic move. And I think they're going to get a lot of value from it in the long run.
So I'm hanging out with a mate of mine in London. He's an architect. He works for an architect, but he's got quite a few projects here on the continent. Interesting things that he's doing around low cost housing and a number of different things. But somehow our conversation led to how tech is changing. Speaking to your point about how tech is basically influencing behavior within hospitality and other industries. But he was speaking specifically about the restaurant industry, and he recently interacted with some folks on a project over at WeChat, and in the context of sort of understanding how China has, just doesn't play by the same rules when it comes to apps and how it influences consumer behavior. And he says the folks at WeChat shared with him that they've got research that shows how WeChat as a sort of monster app has changed the retail landscape in China, in the sense that people aren't shopping the same way anymore, and the retail spaces that do the best in China, turns out, are the ones that are geared towards social interaction and hanging out and that kind of thing. And the mall sort of structure where we build around come and shop by us is totally gone, because people are shopping in app, on WeChat, online, at other portals and other things. And when they do go out for an experience or with disposable income to spend, it's not to spend on shoes that they order and have delivered at home. What they do want to spend on quite differently is experiences and interesting food. I thought that was interesting, and it was actually quite jarring to realize, whoa, how tech can have a crazy impact on real life in unexpected ways.
That's a key point, and I think the acquisition with Micros typically speaks, and it's a signal. We're speculating, but if you think about the last time you went to any hotel or stayed in any kind of a hospitality environment, whether it is a hotel or a restaurant, if you think about the lack of enablement is probably the wrong word, but the lack of integration from a technology perspective, even your favorite restaurant, if you think about, do they actually send you regular information about specials or new things that are coming up at that basic level, let alone have they integrated the entire back office operation? So I think there's a huge opportunity. I think the guys that are getting it right are kind of these cult and niche following type brands. So I think it started with people like Vida eCafe, who started to understand that they've got a very specific kind of consumer, and that consumer wants very specific things, and they were able to go ahead. But the bigger guys, the Sun Internationals, those big groups of people that are getting lots of customers, lots of foot traffic, I don't think they've quite cracked how they're going to be able to bring these experiences closer to consumer, let alone how to create a revenue for themselves. But the starting point is always data. The starting point is always, let's understand what's going on before we can do any of this stuff. And I think this is typically what this signifies.
Well put there, sir. Now, look, there's another massive acquisition that's happened in the last week or two. Vodacom acquiring 34.9% of Safaricom, at least indirectly, through its acquisition of another business for roughly 2.6 billion. And I'm not going to touch on this right now because I'm still, fingers crossed, our homie from Kenya is going to make it through, and because he'll have a lot more to share on this, the specifics of it, the implications of this, and what we might or might not or should not read into this particular deal. And I'll also get him to while he's at it, actually, to speak on the impending interoperability that we've been hearing might start to happen around M-Pesa. So that's going to be interesting. But let's move on to something entirely different. One of Microsoft's co-founders, Paul G. Allen, who you might recall is rumored to have been forced out of the company when he took ill, and there was this whole hubbub. He was with big friends with Bill Gates, and word is their friendship has never been quite the same since then. Nonetheless, he's in good health now, and he's got a huge big data project that's aiming to stop elephant poaching on the continent.
That's quite interesting. I don't know much about Paul Allen, but I think the interesting thing to note here is, once again, the thing I harp on about all the time is, the one thing that we don't have a shortage of in Africa is problems. And I find it quite interesting when people are trying to use technology to solve problems in the space of conservation. I think this is a huge pat on the shoulder for them, but at the same time, I'm always worried about the implementation of such projects and how far you'd be able to scale something like this. I think at its core, what they're trying to do essentially is kind of partnership with lots of game park rangers and managers to be able to create kind of a preemptive response to poaching. So instead of waiting for the incident to happen or creating a long lead time to respond, they're trying to pretty much close that gap, which I think is great. And I think the question there is then, what next? Once you've been able to kind of minimize that amount of turnaround time and your response time around this illegal activity, is that kind of where it ends? There are other areas of conservation that require attention, and I think there's other areas where we can integrate technology. We tend to focus on the stuff that is, and sometimes everybody's focusing on. But I always kind of try and push the envelope and say, conservation technology, what other solutions are there? But for the moment, I think it's a great innovation and intervention. So Paul Allen, big up.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I put this project to Dimension Data's head of IoT. I believe he's the vice president of IoT. I think that's his position at Dimension Data. His name is Anton Juester, and I met him at the IoT forum in London. And I asked him what he makes of this project. And he's quite optimistic that it'll yield something. And being big data, I think his critique of it was. Being big data driven, his critique of it was, well, it kind of seems to be reactionary. Well, look, in time, heat maps and the data will start to point and allow them, like you say, to preempt what may or may not be a strike. But to the mind of someone like Anton, he's very bullish naturally, given his role at Dimension Data, on the role of IoT in terms of in real time being able to react or even prevent the unnecessary death of an animal, say, due to poaching. And I know they've got at Dimension Data a project around rhino poaching, which they're beta testing with some nature reserves in the Kruger National Park. And I think really the perfect project is a little bit of both, right? IoT to sort of be in a position to provide real-time data to prevent poaching, and then of course big data being crunched into hopefully AI-driven software that helps us start to have a sense of where the poaching may or may not happen and where to direct our resources.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I don't think there's going to be one solve in the beginning. I don't think there's going to be a silver bullet. But I do think, as you said, these problems have to be attacked from different perspectives. And ultimately, if the focus is solving the problem, I don't think we'll have an issue. Just as a matter of interest, I mean, wouldn't it be cool if, as an extension of this project, we do know that there's lots of research underway at the moment trying to, link the brain controlling external things. There's this research that Facebook is running. There's stuff happening on medical science. But wouldn't it be interesting if you could implant chips into the brains of these animals? Because remember, there's always that theory that animals can pick up on danger before you can. When there's an earthquake, animals make for the hills because they've got these sensor things. So wouldn't ultimately that be like the holy grail of, being able to read from animals' minds the fact that they're all saying, oh my goodness, something is about to happen? Because that then takes the big data, which is kind of giving you an external view. It takes the preemptive response time, and then it kind of infuses this feeling of an animal. Wouldn't that be cool?
It's interesting you mentioned that, because again, Dimension Data in the sort of high-end sports or commercial sports, high-performance sports arena, they've been trying out these IoT devices that are literally able to track there's what your Apple Watch can do, and then there's what this super bra or this sort of e-bra can do in terms of checking your blood pressure and your blood sugar, and in real time checking your anxiety levels and all sorts of kind of things. And they're applying this thinking to tracking animals, and they're realizing that just having a sort of sensor on the animal's back isn't enough, because who's to say it stops moving for 4 hours, it didn't die in the first one, that kind of thing. And if we start to become more and more intuitive in terms of how we implant devices that allow basically broadcasting into the cloud, there may be ways for us to start to become better and better at protecting these animals.
Yeah, I think, and also the exploration of that's a whole kind of landscape which I don't think human beings have quite explored, is how you start to understand emotive disposition for animals. That's a whole other study of science that could be fascinating on its own.
So yeah, you're actually talking about a sort of biohack, right? Like a sort of hacking
Yeah, which means that we're kind of taking this relationship we have with these beasts to the next level. But you're quite right. So if we can get in the minds of these animals and initially try and pick up on signals that signal danger, because if we're saying that they're the best at doing this, there must be a way, and figure out that pattern. And then the next level that will then be how do we redefine the relationship that we have with animals based on technology, which, as I said, is I don't know what that field of science is called, but I'm pretty sure there's someone smart out there that can maybe give us some information.
Holler at us. You know who you are. If you know what's up, you know what we're talking about. If there's a field of science that covers what we're talking about, heck, you might even think this is a bunch of nonsense. We're going to hear from you anyway. Give us a shout at African Roundup on Twitter. And of course, drop us an email at hello@africantakeroundup.com. Now, staying with East African news, and we'll just touch on this and come back to it, hopefully, when our guest arrives. At this point, if he doesn't, it will be such a disappointment, the number of times I've mentioned it.
We're going to role play, so you guys won't even know.
I'll put on an East African accent.
That's correct, and then we'll just roll with it.
And we'll just lose all our listeners in that part of the world.
Yeah, fake news. We said fake news, right?
Wow. Okay, that's not happening, by the way. So anyway, Google's Nairobi-based fiber project called C Squared has closed $100 million worth of funding. And you'll recall that this project started out as something called Project Link back in 2011, something that then got spun into this company. I'm not sure whether it's a for-profit or non-for-profit. I'd guess at this point that it's a not-for-profit that's happy to make profit, of course, and probably reinvest those profits. I stand to be corrected, however. So the company being C Squared, which started in 2013, and what they are essentially is a carrier-neutral fiber project, which is a project that's trying to basically connect East Africa and hopefully extend its reach to other parts of the continent as well.
Yeah, I think it's the result hopefully is going to be lower installation and consumer costs, which is never a bad thing. And I think naturally companies like Google and Facebook are generally all trying to solve for the same thing. In the bigger scheme of things, is that their businesses depend on more people being able to have access. Right, a big part of that is the infrastructure. A big part of that is cost of data. A big part of that is the devices. So I think this is a firm play to try and say how do we kind of lower the barriers as far as infrastructure and access. And should we do that? I'm always a big fan of value being passed on to consumers. So that convergence play is going to be quite important.
And yeah, look, how do you feel about Google being at the spearheading this effort? Look, I mean, let's be fair now. They have three other partners, convergence partners, which of course is a huge investor, hugely invested in CCOM, for example, and a South African private equity business. They're also in partnership with the International Finance Corporation, which is a member of the World Bank, and then Mitsui, which is an infrastructure trading company. They're all responsible, for, at least in part, for the 100 million that they've just landed. And back to my question, how do you feel about Google spearheading what's now the most, or what's becoming a pretty substantial infrastructure play within the fiber landscape in East Africa? How do you feel about that? Something about it doesn't gel with me. I can't figure it out yet.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I think, it's always tough, right? So it's kind of being the referee and the player and everybody at the same time,
right?
So it's challenging. But I think if we come down to a lowest common denominator from a benefit perspective, number one, I suppose to be contrarian, if not them, who, right? I suppose is the first departure point.
Liquid Telecoms, Blessed. I mean, look, if South Africa...
I jumped on that one quick fast.
I'm like, yeah, bro, let me sort that out.
Yeah, no, talk to me. So, I get it. Liquid Telecoms and all those guys, but I think they're facing very different. There's levels to this thing, right? I think they're facing very different challenges. If you look at the balance sheet, the level of business maturity, the development of both business models, Liquid Telecoms couldn't execute this to the same degree.
And of course, Google's got this vested interest, of course, that I suppose makes them suitably motivated to execute really well on this. Their business requires more and more people, or as many people as possible, to be on the internet. And yeah, this is right. This is playing to that need, in a big way.
Yeah, and I think speed, execution. Ultimately, how long would it take for this kind of thing to be done by anybody else but a company like Google is important to consider. Secondly, I don't think, what gives me kind of a little bit of hope is that I don't think it's necessarily the notion of them being the referee and the player that is bothering. The notion of they should be educated and well-versed individuals that are pretty much stakeholders in this process, that are guarding the interests of the consumer and of the Kenyan community. So I think that is more of the issue than them being the referee and the player, right? Because ultimately we all know that they're doing something that is going to benefit African users. It's saying we're driving down costs, we're giving access, and I don't think we can argue on that. What we are arguing about is that you own the pipeline and you own what's going through it. Therefore, is there not an opportunity for you to start manipulating or misusing that position of power? Yes, potentially. But then again, shouldn't that be a stakeholder conversation a la Rwanda to try and make sure that Google plays according to the rules that have the ultimate benefit for the Kenyan citizen? So I think that's more of the argument for me anyway, than whether they should or shouldn't be doing it.
That's true. I totally take your point. And to their credit, as of the last few weeks, Kampala, Entebbe, Accra, Tema, Kumasi have all reportedly benefited from something like 840 kilometers of fiber that's been laid. That's just between Uganda and Ghana. C-Squared is claiming that over 25 ISPs and MNOs use their infrastructure. So saying that they're an agnostic platform is pretty much being validated by that fact. And then they go as far as saying, 1,200,000 commercial buildings have been connected as a result, which, can't be faulted, surely.
No, that's a big deal. So if you look at that purely from the perspective of the ultimate beneficiary in the short term, you cannot dispute that what they're doing is a good thing. But once again, I think the conversation from stakeholders and government peeps needs to be ensuring that the right stopgaps and or policy regulation is in place to make sure that is not misused in the long term from a power perspective.
Honestly, and we'll talk about Facebook later when we talk international news, but I do think our regulators need to catch a wake up. And by that, I don't mean they need to start preempting every technological innovation and basically stemming progress in so doing. But I certainly do think they need to wake up to what clearly other parts of the world are waking up to in terms of the incredible dominance that we're practically handing to companies like Facebook and Google and these guys, basically by not making sure our interests are on lockdown before they move in. I'm not saying let's not work with them, or I'm not saying let's push them out and only local firms should do it. I just think if they come, then it needs to be on our terms for our benefit.
Yeah, I think, my experience has been that, businesses like Facebook and Google are investing in having internal resources that try and understand kind of the landscape when it comes to policy and regulation. So I think that's happening. But I do think there is a job on the part of governments in many African countries to not be complete blockers of progress, right? I think that it requires someone who is progressive to understand the key challenges, but also someone who is, in inverted commas, conservative to maintain and to respect the laws of the country and the consumer. And I think finding that balance is quite difficult because often the government position is quite extreme in the sense that they're trying to say no to everything, whereas kind of these businesses come in and they're quite progressive and they're trying to say open up and make it. And I think somewhere in the middle is where the magic needs to happen. But often I think the people that can have those conversations on the side of government aren't necessarily adequately skilled to understand implications across some of these decisions. And as I said, it's an opinion, but if we can have that kind of discussion happening with that level of knowledge and insight on reciprocal sides, I think then the discussion and the agreements will be more progressive.
I hadn't thought of it in terms of that spectrum you've just described. On one hand, you've got huge big tech multinationals who are like bullish on innovation, and not just because they're trying to change the world, which I suppose if someone like Mark Zuckerberg is believed, yes, he cares about those things too. But there are these huge corporate behemoths that have their reasons why they'd like to see us all progress, quote unquote, progress technologically. On one hand, you have that. On the other hand, you have government, leadership, policymakers, lawmakers who also, unfortunately, not always driven by altruistic motives or a sense of duty or anything like that, and often see themselves under threat by the coming future that is likely to make them far more accountable than they ever have been in history. Yeah. And then there's somewhere in the middle where we all need to be. And that's where we all benefit. I hadn't thought of it like that, you see. And I don't know if you were thinking it, listeners, while he was speaking and he was talking about we need people like this, we need people like that. Well, I'm thinking in terms of Musa for president. Yeah.
Listen to that. Yeah, vote for me. Let's see who's crazy enough to vote for a Zambian boy living in South Africa to be president. Really?
Musa for president.
Love it, Andile. Love it.
You heard it here first. If you I'm saying it for those of you who thought it, and I thought it, and now I'm saying it out loud. Anyway. Moving swiftly along, folks. Following the footsteps of Hertzner, Terraco, the likes of IBM, well, Microsoft has finally come to the party in terms of announcing big data centers to be built on the African continent. They'll be starting in Johannesburg and in Cape Town. This, according to the executive vice president of their cloud and enterprise business, Scott Guthrie. Pretty exciting news, I think.
Absolutely. This is big. The two facilities are expected to be online by 2018. And obviously Microsoft are heavily investing in the developing world and trying to develop this kind of Africa cloud infrastructure, which I think is super. If you think about kind of a lot of the data centers, in fact, all of the data centers for these big companies are generally not on the African continent. So we're rerouting traffic through wherever it may be, whether it's Estonia, whether it's the US, and it's coming all the way back. There are obviously consumer implications, but I think there's also huge economic benefit to being able to bring some of these skills around developing the actual data center, which is resources and people that need to build these things. Then the long tail, as far as people that need to be in those data centers, operating them, making sure that they're going on and working well. I think it's a great signal and a great initiative from Microsoft. What I also would like to see, I think they're obviously starting in Joburg as far as implementation is concerned, is if they have plans further than that. So if you consider the Africa landscape as 4 blocks, Northeast, West Africa, what has not been clear is whether their kind of data center expansion is going to end kind of in Joburg and Cape Town, or whether they're going to be expanding further east, west, and north, which also should be an interesting thing to consider.
That's a really good question. What I do know for sure is that this is a business decision that no doubt plays very heavily in favor of the businesses they're pushing in as far as their cloud business is concerned. I think of Microsoft Azure, Office 365, Dynamics 365. Actually, quite interesting how often Microsoft Azure came up at the conference I attended in London, given they weren't even major sponsors or anything. So there's definitely this trend towards trying to bring as much of corporate online in terms of digital integration as far as cloud is concerned, but also trend towards what's called fog. This idea that in as much as there's cloud on one side and there's centralized computing on the other, there's a whole sort of new area in the middle that's going to be big because of IoT, where computing is going to need to happen, closer to the edge and all the way, towards the organization. And so I think I see sort of these data centers as part of a trend in that direction, or an anticipation of a trend where, IoT takes hold, cloud is adopted more, but there's going to be computing required right at the edge, as well as at the center as well, and of course much closer to home at much higher speeds with less latency and so on.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting that apparently the decision to build the 2 data centers is considerable. However, it seems like they're going to be co-locating in the beginning, right? So there'll be existing facilities that they're going to co-locate with, but what I think would be an even better investment is actual building of the infrastructure from the ground up, so that we can get ultimately the money circulating as much as possible further down the value chain for whether it's jobs, whether it's skills development, etc. But Microsoft, big up.
Yeah, welcome to Africa, as it turns out. Here's one of our homegrown, also, investing in the area of broadband. It's Seacom, and they're planning to invest in infrastructure growth on the continent to keep up with the increasing data needs of the continent. Now, of course, this is business as usual for them. They're an undersea cable company. They exist for the sole purpose of enabling connection or improving connection on the continent, certainly. But they've been bringing more and more points of presence online. We spoke about on the show here last year, the one in Kigali, and now more recently a point of presence in Gaborone, Botswana as well. Their CEO, Byron Clatterbuck, has, come out saying that, we should definitely look out for them to invest more heavily in the coming year or two. I'm
interested that they've put a point of presence in Gaborone. That's quite different.
Unexpected. It'd be interesting to see the data points that inform that decision. It'd be interesting to know, are they thinking Botswana as a new hub for the Southern African region or what?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's quite, as I said, peculiar is probably the wrong word, but probably interesting. But given the strategy that they followed up until now, within continued growth, especially with the over-the-top players, Botswana is a small economy, maybe positioned in such a way that they can get predictability around the economy and growth in their business. But it'll be interesting to try and get more feedback on that and how that rolls out. But ultimately, as you said, as they roll out throughout their regions of interest, I think they're going to have more plans that are going to be in the pipeline to do upgrades. I think primarily fueled by the video consumption. That's going to be happening through on demand side platforms.
So, can I put my conspiracy cap on?
Please do.
So, we know that Botswana is a huge U.S. ally. In fact, I believe that in the Southern African region, there's probably more, and I stand to be corrected here. But from what I understand, they're a key U.S. ally, and there may even be troops on the ground or base or something out there. That's what I've heard. And it'd be interesting to know if this had any correlation with Botswana's friendliness with the US and the context in which perhaps cybercrime and cybersecurity is becoming a global issue. And perhaps in the region, it might suit said global partner to have traffic channels through a friendly country.
Cue X-Files music. I think that's definitely a conspiracy theory.
And then the people at CCOM are like rolling their eyes. They're like,
what are these two on about? I mean, really, it's like cheap to be in Botswana.
Come on, dude. Like, what is wrong with you people? Can you just not be happy that Botswana have a point of presence?
Yeah, no, sure. Big up. As I said, I think it's peculiar, but we've got our theories. Maybe you know more. So
maybe you know more. And listen, if we're onto something or not, or if you're just really just excited that Botswana has a point of presence, or maybe you have thoughts on where CCOM should be focusing their efforts next. Yeah. Give us a shout, man, at African Roundup on Twitter.
CCOM Gate.
What's that?
CCOM Gate.
Started right here.
Exactly.
No, that'd be fake news. But no. But it'd be interesting. I don't know. But am I even onto something in terms of how those sort of agendas are set in terms of determining Kigali is a good place or Botswana next? I mean, what goes into that? That'd be an interesting conversation to have with the folks at CCOM in terms of determining what the most sensible next step is for them in terms of growth.
Yeah, it could have been a geopolitical decision, right? So can we stay close to South Africa, which is the hub, but can we not be in South Africa given the nature of what's been happening? Downgrades, political instability. Maybe it's geopolitics. You never know. But
interesting nonetheless. Yeah, because there's another angle.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully we can get some insight on that.
Yeah, you're our community, guys. You're our eyes and ears on the ground. Let us know if you know anything we don't. So this trend towards solar energy in East Africa. Again, East Africa seems to be leading innovation in the mobile money scene, and I certainly sense that they're leading innovation in as far as solar-powered electrification is on the board, at least at a micro level. And case in point, the off-grid solar startup Bbox, that's BBX. Now they're scaling up on the continent and essentially using that Mkopa model. We've had, for the folks on Mkopa on the show, explaining their model and how, look, on the surface, it's that whole McDonald's situation where we're selling burgers up here, but really we're a real estate business. In the case of Mkopa and in the case of Bbox, up here, we're sort of electrifying, off the grid homes up here. But really what we're doing is we're essentially a credit business. And we're basically banking people. We're helping people develop a credit history and helping them access credit to light up their homes and hopefully do other things later on down the line. Who knows? These are possibly individuals we could sell into the banking system and so on and so forth. So really this is what's fueling this surface sort of altruistic idea of, hey, let's help light up Africa. In the case of Bbox, it's a business that has tons of traction. And yeah, they have a unique model in that the total installation price for a basic unit with them is like $100 and the customer pays off $6 per month over 3 years. But here's the catch. That battery comes with monitoring. Now, what they've worked into into this technology over time. I think they're now at like a fourth iteration or something like that. They've worked out how to, at relatively low cost, monitor the use of. Oh my word, he's here! Come! Oh my word! And we're talking East Africa, bruh. Nice. We have Mark Kaigwa in the building, people.
Well, what's happening, everybody? What's happening, Africa?
Speak to the people, because we didn't tell them who would be coming.
Oh, really? Oh, it's great to be here, man. You know,
yeah, dog.
Couple things to sort out. This Josie Johannesburg running around life, but great to be here.
My guy, we've been telling people that easily the most well-connected person in Kenya, easily the leading digital head in East Africa is on our way, and they're like, who? We're like, guess.
Good one, man. I appreciate the compliments. It's always just trying to pay it forward, making a way for anybody else. And yeah, there's no better place to do it, no better stage to be on than this cashmere draped recording studio here in Santon. The podcast doesn't play.
I do not know about cashmere, but we try.
Yeah.
Because I'll need to. Okay, so you basically we're discussing B-Box, and I just introed with how they're similar to Mkopa and how on the surface it's essentially a business that's altruistically trying to light up East Africa and the rest of the continent. But just under the surface, really, they're a finance business, right? And I was just explaining to our listeners now that they've worked in their fourth sort of generation products. They've worked in monitoring that allows them, essentially the Internet of Things, really, that sort of broadcast signal into the cloud that allows them to monitor usage and switch it off if necessary. If people, for whatever reason, don't pay up, they now have the ability to switch off those lights and obviously manage their risk in that regard. But also just get a ton of great data that they can crunch and presumably use to develop more credit products, right? What's the real vibe around these businesses in Kenya, right? Or in East Africa, in your experience? Most of them, this one included, are founded by expats, usually MBAs, Cambridge guys. I think in the case of this business, the folks might have been, I think they're from Cambridge. In the case of Mkopa, the guys met at Oxford, and so what's the sense in the terms of like in terms of impact, and also what's the sense in terms of what people feel these guys are here to do on the continent?
Yeah, I think I'll start with the first question. There is a great sense that data that was previously untapped, meaning that the telcos collected it, and because of mobile money, they effectively sat on it, not necessarily creating new products and services. The fact that people can plug in at the source that way, I think, is huge. And that opens up this idea of credit, and just that the fact that you can look at the aspirations of households and of people and just know that you can start to serve them with essentially repayment plans that are tailor-made based off of their data footprint and their ability to qualify for one. And so even I was giving a talk here in Joburg yesterday, and just talking, one of the footnotes was how, the IP address now is also a factor in determining your credit worthiness, right? And, if we know where you are between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m., then we can assign some kind of socioeconomic value to rent and where this part of the city is, and just associate one of now its many other touch points to the second more controversial point.
Yes, and we're getting you on you fresh, bro.
It's like you guys don't. Anyway, guys listening know that Andile comes out singing.
Hey man, listen, we gotta keep it real though. We gotta keep it real because we don't shy away from saying when people do a good job on the show. Yeah. But also, there's just conversations that are never had. There's a certain rigor to discourse that's just lacking. We're not trying to, we're not here to take down anything, but we're here to listen. This is worth talking about. Yeah, like, our people, is the impact? Does it match the value of the data that you're surrendering when you? Okay, do you see now I'm leading now, and I don't want to lead. I want to know the truth. Yeah, let me know. Give me a sense what it's like, bruh.
I think I'm going to point to a few things. The first of which was a very interesting chart that was done by Quartz last year. So, they have that Atlas tool. It's atlas.qz.com, where you can find all these charts and graphs that have been done by the guys and the journalists writing there, and they cite their sources. So they were looking at the biggest deals it was either last year or the year before, the biggest deals in terms of essentially the size of the funding round. And from what I understand, I may be wrong here, I believe there's only like one, if not none, of those businesses that had a senior Kenyan founding partner or a Kenyan in the C-suite. Well, not C-suite, but at a founding level. So it's it said something. Now, that's what the data says. There is something that has really given me life in this debate, because it's very easy for us to kind of read it at a surface level, but there's bigger factors at play, meaning that Village Capital, who are a great organization with some interesting aspirations to how they try and fight their own biases to fund, for instance, expats and so on and so forth. They just published a study where they talked about how pattern recognition on the VC side factors in, and if people aren't aware, they'll go on a long time assuming that Africa doesn't have necessarily like homegrown, fundable ventures. Now, there's clear systematic challenges, from due diligence to pipeline. I'm not going to get into the weeds, but what they actually recognized in this Village Capital study is that, and I think it was done with the Aspen Institute as well, they found that people are using these proxies, which are the Western or the outside way of evaluating someone. So which school did you go to? If I hear school, I know, it's like, Tufts, just like me, or just like my brother or my cousin, or it's like, it's like MIT, or so they're looking for those kinds of validators, and you're going to find that from a finite pool, likely who've not necessarily come from the ground. So it leads to unfortunately just them seeking out the wrong patterns and signals, which the data now substantiates in saying that that local founders don't seem to be able to raise. And I even I'm in a WhatsApp group with largely some major players in the tech ecosystem. I'm a luck on that group because I know people who I don't say that much, but I said something the other day. And I think it was maybe a year ago that someone did a study, and they were asking about, it's come up a few times. This at the heart of this question, and they were just asking, hey, you know what? We seem to see a pattern here. Can we get to the heart of it? And it ruffled feathers because you got strong opinions in there. You got people who are leading in their own right, people who've been turned down by some of that VC money, which went to I'm not going to get into the details, but
let's talk about some of that VC money. No. Wait. I'm concluding. Yes, no. But let's give the people a sense of what kind of VC money we're talking. In the case of B-Box, right, we can, M-Corp has been covered to death. They've got a ton of cash themselves. But let me look here, because I've got the number of what they've landed to date. In B-Box's case, we're talking $40 million to date. And that includes money from the likes of the French energy giant, Engie.
Yeah, hey, look, if somebody's got inroads that way, I've heard it put another way of if you do match some of those signals that people at times VCs are looking for in terms of, the school, some qualifying things. It's your ex-Google, your ex this, your ex that.
But execution too, it has to be.
No, it comes squarely down to that. But what they're also looking for is those external networks. So people, for instance, who've flown in and come to Kenya can aggressively start to develop a Kenya network. But they'll look back home for the real. At times, at least the data would suggest that they find the ability to close deals coming more from support back where they're from, from that school, from that university, from friends and family. So they end up having almost two sets of social networks to tap into. And you could argue the other way that perhaps folks on the ground who are, busy in execution mode, have only one of those. Now, I'll never make excuses for anybody. And I think that there's a lot of people here who've either been turned down and ended up doing great, or who've just been able to do a lot with a little, who would still sit here and tell any local founder that, hey, your grind is what's going to get you somewhere. Now, that said, money buys time, and time is, really what many startups are battling against, just to deliver, to ship. And it'd be great to just see, what I'd actually recommend, there's a very detailed study. I think study I'm mentioning, I will literally look it up just now, but it looked at, I think, over 4,000 applications to this accelerator, and the way that Village Capital say that they battle against those cognitive biases, which they understand that they're susceptible to, which is important, that they would recognize and know that, hey, if it's up to us, we will fall victim to these same sets of biases, is that they actually have entrepreneurs in their network validate the next people to get funded. So it's not just down to this, investment committee or this kind of approach where people are, if you don't resonate with them at that personal level or even at the books level or you don't click, it's down to literally the people they've already funded, who are local, who are invested locally, and those people have equal, if not bigger, say in the investment decisions they make, which is important.
Mark, is this a classic case of impact investments in your mind?
Oh man, you guys are come out singing. I think that, look, if you're talking energy, if you're talking credit, if you're talking people underrepresented or underserved in the financial ecosystem, I've heard it put another way, and I wish I could cite the source, that almost anything you do here has impact, because call someone a capitalist or you like this, and unless, look, if they're raising cash and they're solving a problem here, it's hard to actually separate that from social or at least societal impact. And perhaps that's actually more true the further inland in Africa you go, because there are some fundamental structural things are missing. I've been riding around with my Uber guys these last couple of days, and just marveling, at just trying to really notice what infrastructure is as a common denominator, which a lot of people riding in cars, you just will take for granted. The roads are such, the connectivity is, is this way. We are, I think, 2 minutes away from the Hout train. So there's an element of, you could be ruthlessly capitalist here, and it wouldn't matter as much, because you're like, despite your success, again, I'm not speaking definitively, but you could kind of make and keep that. Whereas I think the further up you go on the continent, you end up solving all sorts of problems you didn't set out to solve. I was looking at something about the Lake Turkana wind project. These guys, and again, they are from overseas, I'll recognize that, but these guys, I think, had to build something like 230 kilometers of road, and it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's sub-Saharan Africa's largest wind farm. And Google's got a stake in it. It's a massive deal for them, and so do a number of other players. So they couldn't, you want to do the deal, but there's a whole lot of residual societal impact you're going to have to either directly address or hopefully. So I don't, I think people have assigned some. I think the word impact investment registers with people so differently, because some have argued. I know that Mbwana Ali of Savannah Fund has argued his case of how money from the development sector, which he would qualify under that blanket of impact investment, actually sets the wrong expectations for entrepreneurs in terms of really them actually just really watching the business live or die by the sword, by the marketplace, by execution. In that, if you can secure some grants, of course those grants are great, they buy time, and that time and that money allows growth, validation, proof of concept, and so on. But
I'm actually curious, when Musa, you said impact, does impact register as almost does it almost have a negative connotation in the context of what is required for a startup to work? Or I don't want to answer my own question. What when you asked that question, were you asking in terms of impact being an amazing thing to aspire towards?
Yeah, I was asking it in that context, because I think part of what Marcus has said is quite true for our context, is that by its very nature, because of the kind of problems that we're trying to solve here in Africa, is that most of the things that you're going to do are going to end up having some kind of societal impact, right? But for someone that is putting money into the country, that may not register as the same thing. So someone investing from the US into Africa may be considering impact from a purely business transaction, while as we're sitting here and we're saying impact actually means you have to be able to drive change fundamentally at society before you make money, which means 5 or 10 years down the line, you may have lost everything that you've invested, but you've actually improved the lives of the people that you're trying to change, which is a different agenda to someone that is investing from outside. And I think because of our unique circumstances, we, and I call it, the way Aliko Dangote has, built his fortune is that, as Mark was saying, you're trying to solve one problem, and along the line, you realize that you actually have to build the value chain to realize the full value in the end of the process, right? And entrepreneurs that are not thinking in that way are not going to fully be able to realize that, whereas, impact investors potentially coming into our environment know that that fundamentally, in order for you to realize the value at the end, the investment that you need to make along the way needs to actually speak to the rest of the value chain. So that was the context. For me, it is completely positive in inverted commas. But once again, speaking from a position of being in the continent versus someone being out of the continent, the views might be different.
So here's the thing, right? What grates me is what's starting to feel like a disingenuity, and a lyingness.
Lyingness. I like that.
It's not my first language, folks. So no, there seems to be big business understanding what drives their commercial agenda. And then knowing what they think they need to say in terms of like selling the sort of residual benefits of what they're pursuing as sort of the main thing, right? So case in point, this is not a let's light up Africa and make it a better place business. This is a finance business, right? And I don't know that the average person who buys a light from these guys, a TV system, pays it off over all these years, is onto that, is aware of that. Is that an issue or not? Maybe that's another debate altogether. But I mean, how about, I was at an IoT conference, right, Mark? I was at the IoT World Forum this past week. And my goodness, the amount of time the likes of Cisco, IBM, and Rockwell are spending in terms of, look how our IoT solutions are helping reduce accidents in the fog, or you know what I mean, prevent drone accidents in Dubai, or to get them. Guys, the truth is, and they did get to it in other parts of the conference, of course. So it's not as though they pretended there isn't any money to be made and there isn't a commercial agenda. But what I do know is that in the sort of popular domain and the sort of consumer domain, in the domain of where most of the average people who care about tech news go and get their news, it's sold as this sort of light up Africa, or give water to Africa, or you know what I mean, or keep Africans safe, or whatever the thing is. And we never get to discussing, to the disservice of our ecosystem and to people grappling with the business issues, we never discuss the commercial thing. You know what I mean? I don't know if you guys get me.
Yeah, look, I think there's another way to look at it potentially, Andile, is that I believe that any technology business that's trying to solve problems in Africa has to be giving back more than they're taking out, right? And that could be a position in the short term. The commercial argument is over the long term that has to equalize at some point, right? So you're coming in, as you said, under the guise of a electrifying business that's there to kind of light up Africa. Yay. In the long term, we know that you're building a business around credit so that you can be able to lend money to those very people that you lit up, and potentially get them into a debt negative situation. So
That's horrible. That's horrible. They're probably cringing listening to this. Oh man.
Well, we're here to call a spade, right? But the view is, is the quantum of the problem that you're solving big enough such that it justifies the outtake that you're going to have in the long run, right? And I don't know whether that's an ethical argument or whether it's a business argument or whether it's okay because I'm actually solving a big problem. I mean, can you argue, by electrifying, by selling 50,000 units or whatever it may be, to that many homes? How many people are you getting through school? How many lives of babies are you saving? How many, so there's that whole aspect. And can you solidly say that there's something wrong with that?
And that was actually at the heart of the question I asked initially, which is, tell me that Kenyans are loving this. Tell me that East Africans are going, this is giving us such value, and so such that the impact, as you say, at least marries with what they're giving up to essentially enrich expats.
I wouldn't go. I don't know if I'd speak as boldly as that, but I appreciate the fact that it's an honest conversation and we're having it. I think the way I see it is that we've got to look at it at that form of capital flight and so on. I mean, if people are genuinely invested and they follow through on and are able to quantifiably show. I mean, one of the things I would love to see here is one of these social or impact-based either funds or a portfolio company aspire to have the kind of openness that a social media company based out of the US called Buffer does. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's
Oh, heck yeah. Buffers, I'm a huge fan of them.
yeah, because like if you pay a $10 a month subscription, it's like 7% to salary, it's like 10% to servers and so on. Like they are a radically transparent company, and this is the place to lead with that. Like I would love to see somebody take the conversation to there to disclose. I mean, Buffer goes as far as like everyone's stock compensation. This is the formula we have, and they've become a thought leader and a much respected company because of that, and they've lived their lives out in the open. And here I want to even argue, like, what do people have to lose to try that? On top of that, I think that the other darker side of the impact discussion, which has been criticized by others before me, is that there is sometimes a dissonance between the commercial objectives and the societal impact objectives. So, we wrote you a grant of $150,000 or $50,000, and that entitles us to some say as to, hey, here's a commercially viable opportunity that you have every right to pursue. Of course, it has those residual benefits that are tied in to the problem or married to the problem, but it'll look better for our donors and where we and the foundations that support us, or the people that are working with us, if we approach it, this way. So for me, I at the end of the day, I would much rather have, like what I'm glad about again, and I'm not trying to beat their drum for them. I'm just glad that somebody has both put forward a solution, talked about how they do it, and recognize the problem based off of data as well as opinion. Because seeing that chart from quotes, right, and it spoke so much, right, because everybody kind of sits back and says and then, as I said, in the Kenyan tech ecosystem, in that WhatsApp group, guys did a study, and I mean I hate to butcher the findings, but it was just more of if you have a founder from overseas, it does help your chances at raising a high, potentially. I mean, we don't have a fixed kind of control group and a sample. Like, we can't empirically boil it down to that, but there's certainly.
Yes, we can. Like, how many times do you personally know that the fact that a founder was an Ivy League alumnus, look, I mean, it's not scientific. I guess it's more anecdotal, to be fair. But I mean, it is a reality.
I'm not sitting here defending anybody. I think, and I don't think anybody wants a defense. I think what I like is that we can narrow it down to systematic, and a systematic approach to judgment. I think there's a case to be made for, people asking, well, who, how, let's say the 10 of us as funds, all have faced this challenge and we want to do more. But we compete with one another out in the Bay and everywhere else. Can we consolidate the fact that we share a mutual problem here, and even innovate from within, on the supply side, of the discussion?
I think there's a big conversation to be had here, and I'm going to throw another span in the works. Go
ahead, Brand.
I think it's an important thing for us to conversate about, and I've often said quite controversially that these inflows of VC funding, in my view, sometimes amount to nothing more than more slicker, more sexier foreign aid. At the end of the day, so, and I think that's, the concepts and the principles about transparency, and how, once again, not only the ecosystem, but also stakeholders outside of the ecosystem, like governments, et cetera, can potentially come to the fore with levers and or ways to manage the fact that this is going to end up being another form of foreign aid. It's going to be another crutch. The outflow is ultimately not going to stay in the country, et cetera. So I think there's a huge question around literally standing up those two financing methodologies and saying foreign aid, VC capital. What is happening? Because I think we're going to be surprised at the similarity in terms of even the qualifying conditions. If you look at people that set up foreign aid organizations in the last couple of years, they had to be Ivy League. They had to, there's a stark amount of similarity in those two, financing regimes. And I think if that is the case, then are we really just taking one step forward, two steps back?
That's an amazing segue into a story that we kind of left out waiting for you to talk about. I mean, the issue around M-Pesa's impending interoperability. Okay, number one. Number two, we did talk about, while you weren't here, we did talk about Google's fiber project, C Squared. And in the context of everything you've just said, what are some of the sub themes, the geopolitical issues, the sort of sovereignty issues, the sort of public interest issues that are at play when you think of, hey, what does M-Pesa, for example, being interoperable mean? What are the implications of letting Google have a substantial stake in East Africa's underground fiber network. So what do you make of all of this, homie? Let maybe start with M-Pesa's interoperability. Give me a sense of how excited Kenya is for that notion, and link it to this discussion.
Yeah, I think let's look back a little bit. So this year is the first time that all non-voice lines of revenue for Safaricom so the scales have tipped, right? We know that voice revenue is going to decrease over time, and this is the first year, if you go by Safaricom's earnings, where they are now earning more from M-Pesa, from data, from SMS, and other auxiliary services than they are from voice. So huge in that respect. I think M-Pesa sits at 27% of their revenue. Now, there's not a lot of examples you can use to assess what Safaricom's move might be, but the one that's coming to mind for me is mobile number portability and how Safaricom acted in the face of that. Resisted for a long time, did not have a really just tried to battle that. Same with perhaps even like Equitel and them getting their mobile virtual network operator license and going on to do thin SIM cards. So they've got lawyers, and those lawyers stay busy. And of course they've got quants and people who are predicting and factoring things into their models to anticipate what it means. The challenge, I feel, is that this will not have as big of an impact as I feel like the impact is not down to Safaricom or what they do. It's squarely down to the competition and how well they take advantage of it. So you do have other players in the market. This would be a brilliant opportunity for them to step up. I hope they've been spending months, hopefully years, predicting and starting the R&D for what would it mean if this was the case, that the phone number doesn't matter, interoperability is there, that I can send Airtel money, Orange money, Tangaza is another one of the players, that was there. So,
but am I right in sensing that their hand might be forced by the headwinds around the government, or at least voices within lawmaking going, hey, Safaricom and M-Pesa should be separate businesses? I kind of sense that maybe people are looking into deeper issues like, is this a quasi disenfranchisement situation where really we're losing touch with the most valuable commercial database we've ever had? We're essentially empowering a whole new financial dispensation that we don't have any power over as a government or as a public. Are those issues at all, or is this just Andile sort of postulating from his Marxist corner?
I think you've got points, and there's something to be said for that. I would want to argue otherwise and just say that I just hold it. One, I don't think that the split between Safaricom and M-Pesa will happen. Just my personal opinion. And then and there's something that I heard said on Safaricom by someone who works there that shall remain unnamed because of the forum. But yeah, it was how if Safaricom was a Nigerian company, the focus would be get them into like another 3, 4, 5 markets and let them be this like this unicorn. Whereas in Kenya, you're I think it's like I don't know if it's $7-8 billion giant or however big it is. And there it's a matter of split it, chop it off at the knees, too far too strong.
Are you guys like strong on the haterade?
It's definitely there. I mean, they're the easiest people to pick on. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that there's a case to be made either way. I just like that the fact that it was a central question around our ambition. Is our ambition to cut them back down to size or to see them kind of rise and spread wings? And this is one thing even that VCs and that side of the funding table have said in the past, which is how ambitious are you? Is it I'm trying to be the biggest in Joburg. Not big enough. I'm trying to be the biggest in Gauteng province. Not big enough. I'm trying to be the biggest in South Africa. Well, now we're talking about what else. What else could you put on the table? And part of the language that could be argued that people traveling in might see is they might have a potentially. It's hard for me to say like lock it stock. Like they're all like this. But it's just the question of, are we ambitious enough? And in the case of Safaricom, what I'd say is, I don't expect, it's just like the only thing, and I don't know if you guys spoke about this on a previous podcast, the thing of great concern to me is still the outage of M-Pesa and the answers that left on the table. So if you have your redundancy go down as well, that's when we realize how much we depend on this thing. That's when people who were sitting in a cab got to their destination, said they couldn't pay, and people are like, wait, what? I heard of stories of people, taking out the battery, the SIM card from the phone, like, because they were like, it couldn't be M-Pesa, it's me. I'm the problem here. Because that's the level of trust that was there. So when you have something that is powering government services, a blackout of, an hour, people
serious economic implications on that.
And for me, it's resolving those questions in an open and transparent way, to the extent that legal will allow them, because they probably will say no. But yeah, I would look at it as this bigger picture of centered on ambition, and just the question on, I don't see people fighting the case for them to be bigger, but I also see them, really consolidating their position. They're not ready to do anybody any favors. This is a reluctant move towards interoperability, which they're like, yeah, we'll grin and bear it. But is there a competitor who can actually make us grin and bear it in the first place? I'm not sure I see that yet.
I've never quite understood how Kenyans don't see past, like, who owns Safaricom. It's totally Kenyan, but totally not, right?
I could tell you why. I think it's, Kenya.
And let me give you context, right? Because we hadn't touched on this. So basically, Vodafone subsidiary in South Africa, has now bought 87.5% of Vodafone Kenya, which effectively gives them a 34.9% interest in Safaricom. Even less Kenyan now.
Yeah, sure. You could argue. I actually saw it. I must read this quote. It's from a story about M-Pesa, and it's gonna drive you guys up the wall.
Bring it.
It's from a New York Times piece that talked about M-Pesa. Let me see here. It was squarely around the genesis of M-Pesa. So it says, M-Pesa is a commercial service, of course. It's by Tina Rosenberg in the New York Times. And she says that, but it couldn't have happened without foreign aid.
What? See, to your point, homie.
We told you.
I'm getting to the kicker. The British aid agency financed small early pilot projects and tested a mobile money service. They also gave Nick Hughes, the global head of payments, now the founder of M-Kopa, by the way, a $1.3 million grant to develop the system, which Vodafone then matched. So Vodafone, UK government. And then here it is. It was one of the most successful foreign aid investments ever. So take that to the bank and you tell me, because does it? You can walk to a Kenyan across the street. They don't care who came up with it, where it came from. They know they feel the difference in their pocket and in their SIM card. And there's a question there of I'm not gonna throw in the towel and say, is this worth fighting for? But again, I'm just happy that this debate has not changed in the last 3-4 years, until finally somebody came, studied about 5,000 applications, looked at all the challenges that we've had, and had a data-driven approach to saying, let local entrepreneurs in our portfolio have just as much say in who comes and referring, in supporting and in fighting and battling the bias. And because I see, people, we could have a panel at a conference, we could talk about it. We could actually bring the people they'd come prepared, they'd have statements. But you tell me how much is going to be done after that. And I think to see somebody who's actually attempting to do it, and
that's Village Capital, yeah. Give them a shout out if it's you.
Yeah, it's Village Capital. I'm just showing that love, because let somebody else come out and tell me how they're battling it. And I hope it starts a conversation across the supply side that would give us a new angle of somebody saying, "Hey, we recognize we have that bias. We could we're no better than anybody else, but here's how we're going about it. Might not be perfect, works for us. Let's see what anyone else in the market has to say."
I think ultimately, the optimist in me is going, then what's the solution, right? So if we're saying that what is possibly touted to be the cutting edge innovation of our generation, M-Pesa, was funded by foreign aid effectively, you know what I mean? What more for the downstream products of all these incubators that are incubating for days and days, and all these innovations that are, so my question is, once again, where do we need to go to be able to get to a point that we are, yes, one, fundamentally, where we agree we need to solve problems locally, but we need to realize value in the short, medium, and long term, and keep that value locked into our continent. What is it that needs to happen? Because from a VC perspective, the people like the Village people. Village. I was going to say village.
Not the village people. Village capital.
That would be a band.
It's also almost no, I take that back. Village capital. But where are we getting kind of a new generation of African investor that's going to understand the imperatives to solve the problem, but is going to be fundamentally obligated to keep that money in a context that's going to continue to drive growth, because that's ultimately the long-term benefit of doing this whole thing. Because that is where it's broken, because we're following exactly the same route as foreign aid did, and foreign aid created lots of problems which we're not going to get out, maybe probably not even our generation. So the optimist in me is going, then what next? What is that thing that needs to happen? Where does the conversation need to shift to? How do we need to break that? Because I honestly believe in our generation we're going to have to break that curse, if you want to call it a curse, but we're going to need to fix that. And I think driving the agenda and driving the conversation is one thing, and hopefully one day we'll have the capital and balance sheets to actually drive the change that we need to. So
for me, it really starts on this podcast. And in my small way, I feel that's a contribution. I just feel like our ecosystem is shrouded in misinformation and underinformation, and I know not all of it is deliberate, and I don't want to paint people in a bad light. To the credit of the folks at M-Pesa, at M-Kopa, for example, I haven't spoken to the guys at B-Box. We've had them on the show, we've had some of the co-founders on this show, and admitting that this is what we're doing, this is how we're going about it, this is our model. I feel really, like you say, it's on us to understand what the game is, right? This is not, let's not get carried away like some will want to at the conference I attended in London, to be like, oh, wow, how cool is IoT? How cool is IBM for, leveraging Watson and helping us, crunch all the world's problems and spit out solutions. Do you understand? Let's not get carried away by that and lose sight of where, the commercialism lies in the context of all these things, right? And I'm saying commercialism not as some evil word, but as something that once you understand it, you can start to harness, correctly, right? You can start to engage with VC. You start to put a value to your data. I mean, on one hand, you've got big companies saying, listen, data is the new oil, right? On one hand. On the other hand, there's them basically wanting you to give it away for free, and making you sign terms and conditions that give them rights to that content. It's effectively giving them a right to a digital persona that you will never have a right to access and monetize, even though you gave it. You understand? So on one hand, it's like, that's why I'm saying there's almost like a sleight of hand going on, and it's actually on us to start to understand and to educate our ecosystem as to, listen, when you do partner with a big scale company, they're going to sort of muscle you into leveraging access to data. If you're a regulation technology company, understand that there's no future for you if you don't have a play that somehow harnesses data and allows you to clean it and sell it to a third party. If the deal you're signing with this bank or whoever's, giving you this great opportunity to work with them blocks you from doing that, you're being hamstrung. It's those kind of data-driven discussions, truth-driven discussions, I feel, contextually, I just used one example, that we need to start to have, so that startup founders on the continent are empowered. VCs or potential angel investors who are thinking of throwing money at a problem think about it the same way an Oxford MBA does when he lands here. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm preaching now, though.
I think the way I'd see it is I would always want to break it down to getting started, right? So you have Peter Thiel's book on 0 to 1. This idea that you have this what's seemingly insurmountable challenge to get started and actually get viable, and then there's 1 to 100. And there's some people who, if you follow that Silicon Valley analogy, they're like 0 to 1 CEOs. Like they get it up, they get it running first couple of years. Guys are doing like a Series B, and the guy's like, I'm out. Right? Or like company goes public and he's like, I'm out. You don't have as many of, I guess, if you think about the big founders of many of the, the top 20 most visited sites, you don't have that many people like that, but you do have people with a hunger to exit, move on to the next thing. And so when I look at the continent and I'm asking, who's that guy in Lilongwe now, just, he's got his decent internet connection. He's showing up to the local co-working space. He's got a prototype that he's working on. I'm thinking about how do I make the space for him to get from 0 to 1 possible, right? And that is the accelerator, the incubator, the local co-working space, whatever that is. And then it's, it could be a grant. I don't think we can discriminate about the source, but it's just more of when it's this 1 to 100, getting to this infinite unicorn-like scale. That's now where I guess I feel like a number of the challenges we're speaking to really become magnified, because you can get to 60 or you can get to 2. And it basically, and maybe about that point is where things start to get hectic. Maybe to just end with the little question that's been on my mind. I've been thinking about, so Kenya right now, the future of finance, which is part of what my keynote here was about. You look at
what were you in town for, bro?
I was giving a speech, a keynote at the JC Decor conference. The out of home guys who just wanted a sense of what's happening in the rest of Africa, what's of interest. So it was a wide ranging talk, just presenting some trends, and it was they're great folks, and I appreciate them bringing me down. So one of the things I spoke about was how I didn't speak about it in this light. So the future of finance is actually playing out before our very eyes. The fact that you've got an Android, and it will be an Android, and that you have this last week Google announcing a new operating system for Androids, I think without below, I think it's 1 gig of RAM. So just devices that were previously struggling to catch up, make sure that they were secure with all the updates. Those devices and the amount of access that external people can get from these devices is unparalleled. And in the finance equation, you have 2 companies, at least in Kenya. M-Kopa is certainly a contender, but I'll skip them for now. You have Tala and Branch, who are the respectively. I wouldn't go into who's got bigger market share, but they're both fighting and playing it out to be the mobile lender of choice. So open your phone, give us access to your data, which of course they don't use that phrase. It's just, hey, it's like, these are the permissions if you download our app of what you're going to get. Meaning, we can read your phone state. Do you check your screen for the time 3 or 4 times a day? Meaning,
do we check who you're friends with on Facebook? We do also.
That's right. So now we're watching where you are 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. We're watching all these, to the tune of 10,000 different data points. Every SMS you've got from your mobile money provider, even SMSs. Are you the one who sends more SMSs? Do you receive more? Do you gamble?
How long are you charging your phone? Do you let it die before you charge it? That kind of thing.
Exactly. And that data is not ours. It doesn't belong to anybody there, in my opinion. And somebody could come out and point me and correct me, but that data belongs to 2 companies based out of Silicon Valley, and they can do anything they want with it. And Kenya doesn't even, to just compare and contrast and show the state of what government has to do, Kenya doesn't have data protection similar to some of the legislature that's here in terms of the Consumer Protection Act and what that means for data. So even in a place like South Africa, it's hypothetical, but perhaps some of the things that we're seeing, which are labeled as innovation and clearly are, would be curtailed a bit, or would have to happen in certain parameters to give due respect to the data of folks. And then of course you can't tread on this without talking about net neutrality and what does it mean. And there's a lot of people on the other side saying, hey, look, just get people connected. We know that's going to uplift them, but just get them connected. Of course,
propaganda.
Yeah, fake news.
Propaganda, guys. Who's pushing that agenda?
Of course, I mean, everybody is, right? Facebook is.
Can I tell you, let's talk about Facebook real quick. Beautiful segue into guys, we don't even have time. I mean, we have to wrap soon, but I mean, trending in Europe this past week has been Facebook, and I think it's a great point to touch on, given our conversation in this direction right now. So it's France, right? And they've got a data protection watchdog that's fined Facebook 150,000 euros. But I mean, here's why, right? It's because they're failing to prevent, they're finding them for failing to prevent user data being accessed by advertisers. This is around the sort of submissions that Facebook had to make to the French government, or to the French regulators around their acquisition of WhatsApp, and they had to convince lawmakers or regulators that, people's data wouldn't unduly be, snatched from WhatsApp and used, for advertising purposes elsewhere, which I know is definitely happening here, because as soon as I'm talking about flying to Paris on my WhatsApp, by some mystery, on Facebook, I'm being pitched KLM flights to Paris. And look, I have no proof of it, so I stand to be corrected. This is alleged at this point. But certainly I feel companies like Facebook, for example, are getting a free pass on this content because they're not being taken sufficiently to task. And that's not to say they shouldn't be trying to do what they're doing. That's just to say we need to get our act together in terms of curtailing, as you put it, what their activities should be for the best interest of the public.
They would argue that, but aren't we doing internet.org?
We're giving you free internet.
I'm so glad Musa left there because I took a. No, he's not.
I know he's not, but I was like, oh my gosh, like Musa's here. It's like, what am I doing? Wow. Yeah, I was almost about to go like, let me compose myself a little bit. But yeah, I just kind of, I'm strong opinions loosely held, and
I'm the same. Listen, I'll change my mind tomorrow, guys. I'm okay. You know, it drives my wife mad, but she's beginning to love it because I'll change on a dime, and it's good. I think we should all be like that. Oh, carry on. I thought it was cool.
Yeah, but we can't. There's a great piece on confirmation bias and how there's two things. There's either your desire to be right or to have been right. To be right means you'll seek out the truth, etc. To have been right means you want your current decision to uphold every previous one you've ever made. And that's just human misjudgment for you. So we can't be that way. And even I know we're all fallible. Anyway.
Fair enough.
Yeah. But to get to it, I think in this case, I see a case to be made either way. I'm happy that free basics is there. And people could say, of course, what they're like. I appreciate what, zero rating and a few of the other different styles of data and connectivity are and what they do, simply because I've been looking at some data the last few weeks on how, first of all, when somebody gets, there's a beautiful, and I hope you guys are signed up to the Nendo newsletter, okay? It's called the letter N. Anyway, we've been looking at... at a study that was done over 1 year where 7 different Kenyans were given a smartphone for the first time. And a smartphone can actually accelerate social and financial problems in somebody's life.
Cue violence.
Accelerate. That's right. You see, that would never register with us. But whoever sits to explain what a megabyte is, and that thing's going to keep going for a larger share of wallet unless you control that. If you do not have what we've been describing as an infomediary, so in the olden age, this is before 2009, it used to be a cyber cafe attendant, someone like that. Now you can have ideally you would have a virtual one, like some kind of chatbot or hopefully something embedded in the device. And I'm excited that Android Go and YouTube Go, and look, they can do more, but that's a start for me. And I just like just seeing some of the thinking that had gone into it. Point is that this actual device, the second most visited website on this year-long study, right, was not Facebook.
What was it?
I'm not gonna say it, but it was a sports betting company, right? Just kind of showing that. And to be fair, somebody could argue it the other way. And if in the interest of not having confirmation bias, somebody could argue these guys have done a brilliant job at marketing and branding and have really embedded themselves in an ordinary fact.
Drilled a well in the village.
Not that, but
I'm being facetious.
Yeah, but here people were gonna spend those 90 minutes watching Arsenal or Manchester United, and they've just piggybacked on that. And the consequences, people are spending more time and even share of wallet in that, let alone the data itself, to access the info to make the actual kinds of plays or whatever it is. So there's that idea for me of who breaks down what a megabyte is still. It's still, I can't say I've figured it out, but I'm happy to see connectivity start to come in a more affordable fashion, given how much can actually start to go. In fact, for me, actually, a big thing, I'm so glad I'm here because it's been on my mind.
Tell us, homie. Tell us.
I wish BlackBerry would come back. I think one of the biggest opportunities for BlackBerry is in Africa. An affordable device packaged with a data-friendly plan, sold on some kind of subscription model or basically, I don't want to call it a contract because that means a lot, but just I'm paying a fixed amount every month.
2 things to what you've said so far. One, I totally hear about the BlackBerry thing. I was speaking I was being interviewed by the BBC about the 3310, and I think the premise was, how excited is Africa going to be for this refreshed version of I was like, who in Africa is trying to be disconnected, y'all? Clearly you fundamentally don't understand the core issues. Most people don't understand the core issues of what's affecting us on the continent. If you think it's going to be this big hit to have a phone that doesn't let you WhatsApp your family on your way home on a taxi. Do you know what I'm saying? Whereas, that's a first world problem where it's like, oh, we must disconnect because there's just so much Wi-Fi. We're so disconnected. And so yeah, you know what I mean? And then you apply that mindset to Africa, and to how you price data and where it fits in society and to its potential use cases, and you really have to open up your mind to what is in the best public interest in terms of data and its use on the continent, and in that context determine, okay, internet is a right for everybody, right? So number one, that's just me, is kind of processing some of those things you said. And another thing, a few months ago, I was invited to on SABC on a local language show to discuss, people frustrated with their data use online, and most of the call-ins were people who had basically run into credit issues because of their smartphone, and again, in context, when we say solution, life-changing, in the context of the average African, that doesn't always look like a smartphone. In fact, in many cases, without all the sort of education, basic education that we're talking about, listen, you do realize that getting a light from these people means you're starting a credit situation. And you do realize that they're monitoring you, and this could ruin your credit score for life. Do you understand that those implications are at play in this context? Yes, no? Okay, cool. Buy the light. Something as basic as that. I'm not saying they don't get these people to tick boxes and they're not doing their due diligence. I'm not even trying to say that they're trying to scam the continent. I'm just saying that sometimes we are not attuned or adequately attuned to the basic needs, information and otherwise, that our people have.
I think a lot of what you're saying resonates, but I do think, and this is perhaps by virtue of being here in South Africa, you're assuming that regulators also have their act together in a sense. I don't see them asking for that kind of data or that factoring into like the actual credit scores, not for a number of years. And by the time they do try and start, critical mass will have been achieved. It's the same way even right now that the taxman can't touch M-Pesa. And like, I'm not going to say likely never will, touch wood, whatever. And who knows really what the inner workings of all that is, but it's not happened. Because by the time that was even factoring in as a conversation, it was, the train had left the station. And as I said, there's some firepower legal on the big green side. So while I recognize that element of, somebody signing off, I think if we were just all to, hop in my car and you guys are in Nairobi and we drive out, we just, stick a finger up in the wind and watch which way the wind is blowing, and we drive that way for 6 hours, and you see somebody with any one of these tools. I mean, you watch it, you come back and check in on them, I don't know, once every 3 months, and you'll just watch a change there that just, this concept of data, I'm not going to say is elitist, but there's certainly an element of privilege associated with you. I was mentioning this in the Q&A at the conference. I was like, you have to be really privileged in a sense to sit there and say that you're concerned about your data, because you for that to be a concept, you have to be socioeconomically somewhere where other people are trying to have, it's a concession they're making and it's a means to an end. And yes, there's a dark side, but that end is more important than this, because it's like, there's my neighborhood loan shark and his muscle guys, and here's kind of like, somebody's just gonna look at my existing phone, my existing records, and take a bunch of what I've already been doing and lend me off of that. Come on, boss, like, this is my life in this town. So if we sit here and talk data, I think it's worth discussing. But I have to bring that other element just to say it's a privilege based discussion, and some people are ruthless about what I'm saying, so they present it with a lot more. They're like, you're too, so they would even justify abuse, and if you try and so abuse of data or darkish workings of data. I mean, there's only one player in the market, and this is Tala. I stand corrected because there could be others. I just hope they'd announce it. So Tala actually forwards, I believe, positive news of how you use their lending app to the credit reference bureau. They don't have to do that. They've chosen to do that as a differentiator, and we know it's for commercial ends. But I'm like, big up to yourself, because if you're going to do that, you're actually showing somebody that, yes, there's the using of the app, but they're the only player in about a dozen other players in the market who bothers to actually have it reflect positively on you if you do walk into a bank weeks and months later. Because for everybody else, it lives and dies on the phone, showing their commercial ends. Whereas if now you walk into the formal banking and finance ecosystem, you have access to other things by virtue of just using this app.
I actually made this argument in a totally different context. I was being humbled to the fact that this very podcast is an elitist proposition in the context of the average African, guys. That's the truth of it, and it's humbling to say. I mean, even just talking mobile money as a trend, we're still by and large as a continent, all markets considered, a cash economy or cash economies. So, I mean, sorry?
Absolutely. I mean, some people have even argued, I know this sounds complete, I must cite it and give a source, but somebody argued despite all the benefits you see and hear M-Pesa having, that Kenya is like, I'll find the number in like the break, but it's a cash economy like you would not believe. And that's the enemy. And I really recommend, if any of you have listened to it, it's fascinating. You must listen to a pair of podcasts done by I think it's the WNYC show Planet Money about demonetization in India. That it is the most, you'll feel somewhat outraged, and then you just have all these existential questions about how they turned cash that was sitting, basically they made cash the enemy, and we'll only know in, let's call it 5 years and so on. But as of now, the president could not be more popular. But literally, if you hear the horror stories of people who, died in the line on the way to taking the cash back, it struck me as bizarre, but it's also one of those things where you find, I've been talking a lot about like my kind of it's going to sound so like consultant-y, but my kind of 4 Ps of Africa is like I know, right?
You've got 4 Ps. Mark Kaigwa's 4 Ps.
It's people, potential, peculiarities, and practicalities. And like and that just speaks to the fact that on the peculiarity side, like my brain can't wrap its head around this guy basically rendered like, gosh, the whole country's cash irrelevant. I mean, the new money that they printed, which were coming to exchange for, couldn't fit in ATMs. I mean, like it's dumbfounding that there was loss and hurt and all these other things, but literally people are happy. Even the people who suffered are like, oh, like now we have a sense of patriotism and a sense of previously we struggled and we were in lines, but now I'm part of these other people all in a line to trade cash because we're trying to get those guys who misuse cash, and we end up paying for it with corruption and otherwise. It's fascinating. I'd recommend it because it just helps, again, just temper all of our bubbling and just showing that
our justice complexes.
Yeah, well, just the fact that you can have a rational argument here, which somebody sees and talks about one way, but then you see what are scores of other people who seem to have a completely different take, and you can't explain it. And it's in this case, an Indian thing, or in some cases it could be an African thing, and it's counter to your own notions and your judgments, but it's actually the way people see things, perception.
Yes, folks, we do not have.
Oh my word. We need a couple more days to talk about that.
So listen, I know it's a podcast and all, but we do have to wrap this thing, and I said that like half an hour ago. What a treat having you guys in this. I love having you every 2 weeks, Musa. It's been such a treat. As for you, it's awesome having you in town. And so this is going to be rapid fire. I just want one word to describe your thoughts on the following. I'm going to top things that I need reaction from you guys because I value it. Okay, so I need your reaction.
Hot takes. I found out what that means the other day, and it is not a compliment from the side of the journalists. Where you're just basically saying something so that guys on Twitter like start to troll you. But I will not give you that. I'll try and have a good sharp take. Let's see. A
sharp take, not a hot take. Okay, then I didn't even know that distinction. Okay, so Smart Cab is the latest ride-sharing service in Nigeria. As it turns out, Nigeria needed one more. Anyway, they launched in February this year. Here's their differentiator. They plan to allow you to get a 2% cut out of any rider that you sort of refer to the service. So he's building a pyramid. And of course, what's the other thing that he's doing? And he's also letting riders choose their preferred riders. He's letting drivers choose their preferred riders. He's letting riders choose their preferred ride and drivers.
That's there in Kenya, and I've never used it. Like, I'm like, it sounds great. It's a nice bullet point in your feature list and differentiator list, but I can't wait for somebody to show me how it actually works in practice because, I'm at home. I need to get somewhere. I don't care who picks me up.
Right? Your thoughts?
Especially because of Nigerian traffic. Like, surely the closest person to me is the one that's going to get my business, right? So I wonder whether it actually, from a reality perspective, it's going to make a difference.
No. Me, I want Ikpe, and he's across town. And no, I'm joking. I would never. Yeah.
Hey. Look, if the relationships are strong. I mean, just today, I don't even know if I should admit this, but I rode with an Uber somewhere, and I told the guy, hey, you know what, conversation's been all right. Why don't you stick around? I'll request one in like 2 minutes just now. And basically Uber knows this. So the guy could, every time I requested one, and I canceled too, like it didn't pop up on his phone. So I was like, you know, and he was very okay with it. I don't know why. I've seen that happen in other countries, but it's obvious that Uber's onto the drivers now.
Yeah, I think in that case where the request would be practical, right? So if, as you said, the person is close by and I can choose them, it makes sense. But in the big bad world of traffic and the big bad world of geography, that's not always the case. So as an option, yeah, maybe nice, but if that's built into the system, that might be an irritation.
And Uber's also got an obligation to make sure everyone makes a living. So you can't be the sentient guy. Like, you'll be nice to everybody, and you'll be the only one who wants to ride with.
That's true. Makes a lot of sense.
But the money thing, yay, money thing. Give money back to the people. We like that.
Okay, so everyone you refer, you get 2%. I wonder if it's 2% from the first ride they have or forever thereafter. Otherwise, you're going to make millionaires, eh?
Terms and conditions apply.
Terms and conditions apply, no doubt. Xeno Ventures, a Silicon-based venture capital firm, which you can find very little information about on the internet. Nevertheless,
that's our conspiracy. We need a theme track for conspiracy theories, right?
we run them regularly these days.
Yeah.
I got no speculation, like big up to them, but
Sorry, I hadn't even put the question to you. So Xeno Ventures, they're investing an undisclosed amount in the Y Combinator alumnus, Tizeti. Now, the Tizeti's aim, of course, is to provide unlimited broadband access across Nigeria. They've got these packages that they've been offering, and it seems they've gotten a vote in the right direction. This has only barely made our news list this week, only because of how I like what they're out to do. But I hate the fact that it's undisclosed because it doesn't give us a sense of scale, and also just what's their tide, really. But anyway, what do you guys think of this? Do you think it's something that could catch on? Do you think unlimited data as a proposition is something Nigeria could catch on in Nigeria? Hey,
unlimited data, unlimited electricity. You gotta start. It's the new Maslow's pyramid. Of needs, and data is there, but it is above electricity. So I mean, more part to them if they can find a way. And I'm big on this. Companies that set out to solve one problem and end up solving a couple others on the way. If they start figuring out, maybe they end up building some actual products or physical. It could be that their entire setup includes a backup power. So almost brick-like, right? I don't know. Let's see. Because if you're providing just the connectivity, that's in this part of the world, and certainly for the continent, that's only a fraction of the problem. Now, it could be a very profitable fraction. So it all depends on how they go about it. And here's hoping. I've actually never had Andile say he hates anything, so I'm kind of sitting here going I'll never do anything undisclosed with Andile. But I think it'd be great to know how much is raised or what their roadmap is. So
what are you planning to do with the money? I mean, reach out to us, Tizeti. We really like what we think we're hearing you say you're going to do. Let us know. It's wifi.com.ng. Check it out. They offer unlimited data plans starting at roughly $30 every month.
Yeah. I think the nature of this conversation, so my hot take is what are you solving and what are you selling? Those are two different propositions, but they both need to be asked. Because solving one issue means, as we've seen with electricity, as we've seen with these guys, probably not. That's not what they're selling. So that's the hot take. What are you solving and what are you selling?
This sounds like impact, right? Given our discussion, right? So
yeah, well, it's guys' impact. So we need to figure that out. I think there's always going to be this murky thing about, be very clear about that, because you can pretty much solve anything and come into an environment and be like, yeah, you see, I'm solving this. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, what you're selling is a very different thing altogether. Would they have let you in if they knew what you were selling?
And we care. So this is come from the context of, guys, we actually care. Speaking of selling, Kwese is selling their partnership with ESPN as the best thing since sliced bread. They think they're taking on whatever's out there in cable land at the moment, and they think they're just going to kill it. They are making an African version of Sports Center. They're just taking over, boy. Look out, Super Sport or not.
First of all, I'm really enjoying the playoffs right now. And no matter how anybody feels on the podcast, it's gonna irk some people, but I gotta get it off my chest. LeBron James is the best player of all time. Now, question I'm excited about.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, good. But there's some listeners who are just there cringing right now, like, oh, this guy just had. Yeah, go Cavs. What I'd say is, I think what's huge about it for me is I actually wasn't that big into basketball and so on, but Kwesi really got onto my radar. Unfortunately, I have not been able to sign up, so I don't know if in Kenya they're up and running yet, because I did look like about last week because I signed up to NBA.com. But just, I think the bigger picture, we've seen SuperSport almost like peel back a bit and defer, especially with the Premier League, to the UK feed, the UK studio, the UK guests, and the entire way that they want to run it out of there. And on this end, we're seeing Kwesa kind of step up and say, hey, we want to make that sports center. We want to actually play it up this way. And competition for me is always going to be a win, especially when it comes to live sports. And who knows what the bigger play is. I mean, certainly from Kenya, if we look at SportPesa, 4th most visited website, now, second Premier League team that they're sponsoring. Other questions aside, it's interesting to see. I'm curious if they will, if you plug in at the sports level, there's a much bigger value chain there, and I'd be curious how they go about realizing that.
I think what makes sports work in the US is the channel's one thing, but I think what is actually behind the channel in terms of data and how they can use data to drive inside conversation, excitement, and drama is important. So I think the play into the sports space is short-sighted if you haven't got a strong data play around understanding things like player performance, things like stats and crucial information, things like player journeys. Where did this player start? So all of that back-end stuff, which ties into some of the conversations we're having around hyper-performance, Internet of Things, how do you monitor behavior, how do you monitor all that kind of stuff is going to be what is going to sustain the play. So I think the play is right, but I think there's a piece, and I'm not sure whether it's part of the plan or not, but there's a piece around the kind of stuff that's going to keep people watching. And imagine you had that kind of information around your favorite player in an Africa context. You've watched his story from when he was a little league guy right up to the whatever they call the equivalent of the playoffs. You understand when his heart rate is going up, it means that he's about to make the great shot. That kind of stuff.
And by the way, Dimension Data is playing in that field. They're working on getting stadium setups that actually plug into player vitals in that way, like literally, on the screen and stuff.
And if they can do that, yay. Then I think then they're onto a great thing. But I think just we got a channel that does sports and we leveraging ESPN and I'm not too sure.
So let me tell you what, I've made this disclosure before. I love Econet. I love what they represent, and I like the idea of Kwesi. Full disclaimer. Copy and paste never appeals to me. I've never seen it work on the continent. SuperSport is a strong, locally homegrown brand. Now, granted, it's not representative. It might not be everything we all want it to be. Probably no NBA, obviously, all that kind of stuff, and there's certain things that you want from it. But to their credit, they are a world-class sports casting offering. And you will not overnight, just by ESPNing yourself, take them on and succeed, right? So yes, I'm interested to see what you'll do with the ESPN website, the mobile app that comes later, that they say is coming out later this year, that is going to be Africa specific. I'm interested to see how you're going to make African versions of ESPN shows. We've seen MTV, for example, succeed in that space, to a limited degree. You can sort of localize that brand and get people to love it. But if this is just a pure sort of cable play, hey, we're with ESPN and they're so huge and they're great and they've got the NBA. If that's your play, then I'm not excited.
I mean, ESPN just had some layoffs too, and their model is looking really shaky. They had, they tried to go into respective cities so that you had now an ESPN in that city for that city, then a large ESPN, and it just seems like they've actually let go of what people say are like some really amazing people just along the way. So it's maybe developing and this market's now appealing to them. We'll see. But yeah, I'd say it's there's some caution, especially given ESPN's trying to consolidate wherever they're at right now.
And I think you might run out of rope. And once again, coming back to the idea around solving problems in Africa around the value chain, right? So ESPN almost are right at the end of the value chain in terms of we'll show you what happened then. But then, in South Africa, we know, and in Africa, there's the whole long tail around development, around how the process works in terms of finding players, how scouts are set up in South Africa. There's only like 1 or 2 black scouts that find rugby players, as an example. So all of those things in terms of the value chain become important in being able to create great sportscasting. And I think think, once again, if they're thinking really strategically about the long term, that is really going to be where the value in the content and also this problem solve for them. And that's going to create a position where they can differentiate. Otherwise, Supersport have been playing in this game, have been playing very well. Have they taken into consideration the value chain? I don't think so. Are they probably another kind of foreign aid play? If you think about their relationship with Naspers, maybe they are. So Strive might be in a unique position to try and debunk this, and I think there's a lot to think about.
Yeah, great points all around, guys.
No, but I was actually going to say, and this is completely unrelated, I was very happy to be walking around Johannesburg today, and I did like a double take, because I was like, my eyes, went one way, and I had to look back, and I was like, is that Andilo in the newspaper? So big up, my brother. I know I'm not trying to embarrass you, but just saying that, I was like, hey, I know. It's like, I know. I was almost at the reception saying, I'm here to see this guy right here, Yeah. So,
that's really kind, man. That's really kind. Shout out to the good people at Business Report. Of course, we're syndicated across South Africa, and of course African Independent. Shout out to you, Africa, because we come at you once a week as well. So yeah, thank you. That's kind. He's got me blushing. Okay, moving on. We're winding down now. I'm gonna skip right across Naspers' latest big ass acquisition, spending something like 387 million euro on the food delivery business, Delivery Hero in Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. Google it and see what's up there. But it's just worth mentioning because it's arguably, in fact, the biggest tech deal of the week. Like a local entity, like buying internationally, which Naspers is definitely on the warpath in terms of like just acquiring great businesses abroad. Look out for them. But nonetheless, let's move on to the last thing I want us to discuss. I mean, how can we not? Do you want to cry? Who wanna cry? Huh? Come on now. Is Tim Cook not now vindicated for not trying to help the FBI crack that phone all that time ago? There was a terrorist who did bad things in America, and of course the FBI wanted to hack his phone and they needed Apple's help. And Tim Cook says we can't do that. We can't expose our hundreds of millions of people who trust us to potential vulnerabilities by handing you access to these things. And now look where all those vulnerabilities the CIA has been hoarding have gotten us, right? I don't know. That's just my sense. What do you think?
I have a different take, and it has nothing to do with Tim Cook. Is it conspiracy? No.
Conspiracy? Or does this have to do with you wanting to make sure you get your next American visa?
I thankfully I have the visa. The question is, if I get to the border, am I making it out the airport?
Oh yeah, because there's all that too. You can have the visa, you're not gonna get it. No, and to be fair, okay. So let me also, for the sake of making sure that when my family wants to travel, we travel. So no, here's the deal, guys. Am I saying that I believe data sovereignty is a huge issue in defense of the FBI and other sort of entities in that sort of high tier level of intelligence? I don't think enough African countries are taking it as seriously as they are. Okay, number one. Number two, though. That's not the same thing as realizing that because of the interconnectedness of the world, you cannot carelessly hoard vulnerabilities and think they'll be safe just because you're the government. Do you get what I'm saying? And so maybe we need a whole rethink around that whole thing and the role of these big tech companies in context to that as stewards and gatekeepers in helping us all stay safe, right? So that's all I'm saying. I'm not suggesting that, a free-for-all happen. That said, what do you think?
Yeah, I just want to point out something. I think the bigger story for me here, and that's a bit underreported with the WannaCry ransomware attack, is the nature of software and how it's sold and Microsoft's role in this. So if there's a brilliant piece in the New York Times by a lady called Zeynep Tufekci, and so what she spoke about basically is how this became so bad. And it's squarely down to the fact that a vulnerability, so the NSA had, that's the U.S. National Security Agency, had found this vulnerability, which, who knows how they chose to use it to perhaps, solicit intelligence and so on and so forth. Anyway, hackers secured the details about this vulnerability And Microsoft and the NSA were in communication, and so it was like, hey, this is out in the open and hackers may have it. So here's what Microsoft did. They and many other players in Silicon Valley and across the world, they sell software as is, meaning that, hey, I'm going to sell you this piece of software and my license protects me from anything that happens going forward. And the challenge of that is that when the NSA and Microsoft discussed this, they said, okay, we're going to issue a free patch. But if you're a corporate, if you're a hospital, if you're a medical center, you have to buy a special paid license to get what was a free patch for everybody else. So it deliberately left the most vulnerable, larger corporations, which serve, tens of millions of people across the world. They were specifically vulnerable because that's how software is sold. So for me, it's this philosophy which builds on what Zainab says about how we sell software and we just assume that that's how it's going to be. That's how Microsoft and the others do it. So it must be the way, when it is not the way, and it's not the only way, because they we have some conspiracy
That's
music.
the conspiracy music in the background.
Yeah, so I think for me it's the fact that
So you're taking it a step back, right? So my surface evaluation involves the way that security agencies typically go about trying to protect us using cyber vulnerabilities, right? Either to exploit them in order to do things that access information that prevent the next bomb attack, or that kind of thing. And it's all good stuff done for good reason. The question is, where did the problem start? And you basically pointing to a systemic problem that got us here in the first place, right? Is that am I summing it up correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if you think about what the ransomware did, you came to your computer and discovered somebody had taken control of your computer through a vulnerability, and there was a ransom. You have 3 hours to pay us $300 in Bitcoin. But the genesis of that, like the whole Tim Cook thing, that is more of like a philosophical debate, because he's Apple. I mean, there's Macs in this place, but so we weren't affected. But my point is that if you're on a Windows machine, you have to go to the source. So I don't vindicate Tim Cook. I'm kind of staying clear of that, only to say that in this particular case, I want to read like a powerful quote here in this article. We're pushing the Internet of Things, right? So baby monitors, refrigerators, solar lights, right? And those are sold on the same mechanism. This idea of it's sold as is. So if there is a vulnerability, you don't hold the company accountable, right? And if there was a patch to fix it, that's in some ways that's on you. And here I think, so what Microsoft ended up doing is, after it had been discovered and was out in the open that they withheld this update from the National Hospital Service in the UK, treating 50 million people, ambulances having to be rerouted, they gave it away for free. But if you think about it, and this is the quote I just want to leave, it's kind of a bit of a bombshell here. The money that Microsoft made off of the people who paid for it the first time never expired, even though the licenses did, right? So they have a right to fix those defects. And if you think about it this way, right? If Microsoft is saying pay us extra money or we will withhold critical security updates, then that is its own form of ransomware.
Dang! Drops mic. That is pretty powerful. I like that. And it is. I mean, at the end of the day, if you've done something and you need to correct it, it doesn't make sense. But
somehow in our minds, we accept that's how software is bought. But as you can tell, you think about the rest of the content. There's still people who are still on Internet Explorer 6. Now, you can argue with me all you like. That's just, people here are still using pirated software. Now, the Microsofts and the Googles and everyone else is trying to change that. But the truth is that, if you're, I was... let's just say, even I've looked at the price of some of these bits of software, and yeah, it's a pretty penny if you're not in a position with a company that can, you can build that stuff to expense it.
I still don't even have the Office suites on my Mac, even though I still think in that, I love the Office suites, right? It's what I came up in, but I just can't bring myself to part with what's required to get like a legit version for my Mac, so I totally get you. And listeners, if you've tuned in today and didn't learn something,
well, I don't know how we're gonna help you, but
yeah, it's gonna be a tough one. If you've tuned in today and you haven't got something from this, or you aren't gonna go start a business, then you've got a problem.
I'm perplexed, right? In a good way, right? My brothers here are perplexing me. They're just stretching my mind. And like you say, I love this medium because it allows me to be wrong about stuff, just put it out there. I think it can have rubs, as you pointed out earlier, but I think I'd love for any of you listening to take us up or, challenge anything you've heard here today. Enlighten us. We can't possibly know everything, and we can't possibly learn everything that we need to know in order to move the needle for this ecosystem. And so that's where you come in as a community. We'd love to hear from you. If there's anything we've touched on, any story, perhaps a story we left out that has to be in, perhaps a signal or a trend that's forming that we haven't quite caught on this show. We want to hear about it. Please give us a shout. On Twitter, we are at African Roundup. Send us an email, hello@africantechroundup.com. And of course, please send us those audio comments because we'd love to include them on the show. Get your voice heard. Take us on in the voice. I almost said in the flesh. In the voice. We'd love to get your voice out to our incredible listeners around the world. And yeah, before I thank the gentlemen and before they go, one last time, I'd like to thank the team behind the Afrobytes Tech Conference 2017 for sponsoring this episode of the African Tech Roundup. They certainly got their value for money this week. All 2 hours plus of a podcast to sponsor. I
actually just wanted to say something real quick to the listeners.
Did you?
To the listeners. I actually think I appreciate the audience, and as you can tell, we've got strong opinions, but loosely held. There's one particular audience member who wrote to you. I think it was when you were talking about fake news. That really changed my mind. Like, he or she, I think, sent an audio note. You either played it or you talked about it.
I think it might have been someone from Washington. I can't remember.
Someone from the States. And so big up to those people who actually write in and talk. That person who's probably listening now, I was actually very positively affected by what you said, and I had to change my mind. And I had really committed myself to one point of view, and so I'm always glad, of course, to hear from any listeners. And thanks to you, Andile. You do a great job.
Oh, word. Come on. Thank you, man.
Oh, that's so sweet.
All right, stop it now. Stop it. Too much love. Okay, so again, the Afrobytes Tech Conference team, thank you so much. Afrobytes Tech Conference 2017 coming up, of course, June 8th and 9th. Can't wait to see you in Paris. Check out everything you need to know about the conference. Watch the video. Find out who's speaking. It's an incredible list of people. And most importantly, register to attend at afrobytes.com. Can thank you be enough, really? Thank you. Huh?
We can start there. We need some party. What are the hot shots? Hot quotes. What are they called?
Hot takes.
Hot takes. Okay, so here's a hot take. You guys are the best.
Here's my hot take. In a world of fake news, stay real.
Dude, you've got a crazy radio voice, man. I'm like, get this guy. Wow.
He's been doing it.
You both do. You guys actually, I know. Yeah, it's funny just being here because I feel like I'm actually with you every day. It's like I normally listen on my drive to work. So
I was about to say, well, you are technically with us.
It's true. It's very meta.
Very meta. No, but guys, really, thank you so much for adding such value to the show and for being here. You are great people, good friends, and most importantly, amazing Africans. So thank you, Musa Kalenga. Thank you, Mark Kaigwa, the very finest from Zambia, Kenya, and Zimbabwe. It's Andile Masuku signing out. Do take care, Africa.